Welcome to Gobster's latest video. Remember that the following is his opinions and may offend you. If you are, no one cares. Now let's get to it.
Well, hello you gorgeous mother truckers, you, and welcome to another video. Right then, the Air India crash, you know, the one that took off and just pancaked into the ground. I did do a video on it to give you my rough ideas of maybe what had happened. Clearly we didn't know what had happened until now, kind of. Yesterday, shall I say, a lot of people started reporting that the Wall Street Journal and Reuters and that had read the preliminary report. Now, before we go any further, in aircraft crash investigations, there is a preliminary report which sort of lays the facts, what they've got available. So it'll be the reasons how and what. But you have to wait for probably a year before you get the why. Okay, so the preliminary report just gives you the what and the when and the how, but not the reason why. That takes longer. Just so we clear that up, so now you understand. Now, these three newspapers have reported that in the preliminary report, it was said that the fuel cutoff valves were in the cutoff position. And just to explain what that means is, on most planes, you obviously have a fuel selector switch, which you have on or off. Some have ones where you can turn it to select different tanks, but mainly it's on and off. And usually your starting procedure is, when you get in the plane, you put your auxiliary power unit on to start all the systems up. You switch your fuel to on, and then once it's there, you press the start button. Some have switches, some of them, like the sisters that have a key, you actually turn to start the engine. And then when you land, the reverse happens. So you actually turn the engine to off. In some, like the Cessna, you turn it to off. Other jet planes, the way you do it is you put the throttles to idle, you reach down, and you cut the fuel off, and the engines stop because there's no fuel. Because the cut-off valves, when you hit them, obviously you've got valves that are open. The second you hit it, slams them shut. It's literally milliseconds. So it literally does cut the engine straight off. And the reason that's done, if there was a fire, for instance, in your number 2 engine, you cut the fuel off, and immediately that engine is now not being provided with anything else, any more fuel to that fire. So it has to be instant. So that was the report. Now, unfortunately, that was not correct. Personally, I was going to do a video yesterday, but I thought, well, if the report's been released or the report's available to be read, I'd rather wait till the actual report comes out before I say anything. And as it turns out, the fact that the plane was found with the fuel in the cutoff, or basically fuel off in the down situation, is actually incorrect. They were not found in that position. I'll explain why. So, when the plane did what it normally did, it ran down the runway, everything was fine. They rotated, so they've lifted off the ground, everything is going fine. Now, as you could possibly imagine, that when you pull back on the stick and your nose goes up to look, there's not a lot you can see out the window other than sky. You can't see any, there's no reference there. So your peripheral vision is now looking for the ground to be sinking away as it should be. And then you're in the cockpit looking, making sure that you're the right climb angle. So you're looking at the instruments. So it's all mainly going on around you. Okay? Now, a lot of people have said, or some people are saying, that the fuel cut-off valves, the switches, must have just vibrated and dropped down. Now, there was a bulletin. Now, there's advisories and there's bulletins. The advisory is fix this now, and the bulletin is there may be an issue. You can take a look at it if you want, but it's not. You've got to fix it. And way back on the 737, it was reported that the fuel cut-off switches, their indents had been removed, so they were literally like switches. Because when somebody says a switch, to anyone who's not flying or doesn't understand when you say a switch, you think it's like a light switch, yeah? Like the switch here, you know, if I do that, the light comes on. If I do that, the light goes off. Okay, so that's a switch. Well, in an aircraft, especially on important systems, it's not literally just a switch. Basically, you've got directly below the throttles, there are your fuel things. They've got two big bars either side to stop you accidentally knocking them. And there's a bar in the middle. So for you to actually put the fuel on, you have to, they're in their down position, so you have to grab them, pull them up, move them up, and let them go so they drop the other side of the bar. You don't do it like that. You normally would do one and then the other. Okay, so because you've done one and you're starting that engine and you do the other. So you don't do it like together. And that's important. So once they're in, it's impossible for them to be either randomly knocked accidentally or for them to fall out. And if you don't seat them properly, because they're spring loaded, the second you let them go, if they're not in the right place, they just drop back down to cut off. So that's before you've took off. So that's highly unlikely. Again, remember though, we're not sure because we are got to wait for the why bit of the report, which is the longer bit. Okay, so plane rotates, starts to do its climb. The pilot's doing this, that, and the other. Now, some people don't understand this in aircraft, especially in commercial aircraft. There's a captain and a first officer. Now, they do rotate landings and takeoffs. Okay, because they are both qualified pilots. Okay, so they may have got in the cockpit, and the captain might have said, "Well, actually, today, first officer, if you want to do the actual takeoff, and I'll do it." So, because the way it's done is on takeoff, the person in charge of the aircraft is the one who does all the throttles and the lifting up, and and getting the plane flying, while the second officer, the second in command, first officer, the second person, is doing all the other things like checking the throttles in, making sure that's working, doing what the captain or whoever's in control. So if he says undercount gear up, you'll go gear up. So the pilot's left to actually just maintain and get the plane flying, and the other guy. But they swap. So at the moment, we don't know who was in command of the aircraft, whether it was the captain, who always sits in the left seat, because in aircraft, everything's left to right. So number one engine is left, number two engine is right. And because all the instruments are set that way, so you scan left to right, okay? So the captain always sits in the left seat, first officer in the right, but they will swap responsibilities and roles. So you don't know who was in control of the aircraft at the moment. That will come out in the full report. So it rotates, it gets up, it's doing its climb. Now, it is then recorded on the flight recorder that first engine, I think it's engine two goes off, and then a second later, engine one's fuel goes off, which is the delay for take one off, take the other off. Now remember, the pilots, the commander, whoever's in control, is probably looking at instruments and may have caught that at the corner of the eye. And as it sounds on the voice recorder, they did. Now, as soon as they did that, the cockpit, the flight recorder immediately indicated that both the engines started to spool down, because, as I said, once you hit those things, the fuel's cut off instantly. No fuel, so the engine starts to slow down, because it's like when you run out of petrol in your car, you judder and then you stop. Well, you don't judder here, they just go down. Now, before it comes up on the instruments, you will hear that. If you've ever been on a plane, you hear the engines, don't you, as you're going, yeah? Well, you'll actually hear woo, and that's the engine spooling down. So you'll have heard, the captain or whoever's in charge, the pilot who's flying, will have heard the thing. Hold on a minute, that stands so the engines are going down. Then they would have scanned and checked the engine things, and you'll see the needles dropping down, or whichever way they are on the thing. You'll see the needles dropping down. Then it would have gone into his head, well, hold on a minute, I swear I saw him reach down. Now, this is where it goes, they didn't fall down and it wasn't an accident, because if that was, the first thing you would have heard him say on there was, check the switches. What's happened to the switches? The fuel switches, what's up? What's going on with the switches? He didn't. He turned around and said the words, why did you do that? And the other guy goes, I didn't. Now, we've all got, well, a lot of us have kids, and you know full well that if you turn around and say, why did you do that? They'll go, I didn't. I mean, I've had an incident with Charlie, who, in a fit of anger, I've got like plastic paneling on it, and punched the paneling, and then come down and said he found the holes. But, so when I went, why'd you do that? He goes, well, I didn't. Well, it's obvious he did. Yeah, so there's the thing. They didn't fall down. It wasn't a mechanical failure, because you would have said, what the hell happened to the switches? He turned around and said, what did you do that for? Why have you turned them off? So now it's 10 seconds in. All this has been done in just 10 seconds. Whoever's in control's gone, right, I've got a problem. So then, which is contrary to what everybody else said, number one engine's fuel switch goes back into the on switch power. Then a few seconds later, 2 seconds later, number two engines goes in. So the officer in charge has now re-engaged the fuel. In the flight recorder, engine number one begins to spool back up and actually manages to get to core speed. So he's beginning to get thrust out of number one. Unfortunately, number two doesn't recover as quick, those 2 seconds making all the difference. And he just didn't have enough, and it just into the ground. Some people say, well, I mentioned it when I saw the first, the fact that the rat had dropped down. The rat being the auxiliary power supply with the propeller. So if you put both fuel things into the off position, the rat will go, whoa, shit, that's not right, and drops. Now, some people are saying, well, how come that doesn't happen? What you have to understand on the ground, what you have to understand is, in the landing gear, the switches, yeah? When the plane lands and the weight comes down, remember, it has to be the weight, because obviously you may abort the landing. When it feels the weight of the aircraft on there, it goes, right, we've landed, and switches everything to ground mode in the aircraft. So, for instance, you now can no longer raise the undercarriage, because it goes, no, we're on the ground, okay? So, it's got the wheels up, and then the engines drop, which is when the rat drops out to try and give him power. So, whoever was in control of that aircraft desperately tried to get that aircraft back up in the air. Just ran out of space. So when they're reporting they were found in the off position, they were not. Whoever was flying it was desperately trying everything that he could to get those engines to kick off. Now, remember, just mentioned ground mode. Obviously, on ground mode, when you put them into fuel, you've then got to, on the 767, remember the switches up here, you've got to turn the engine switches to ignite, turn them on. In air mode, if you do that, the plane goes, well, I'm in the air, so he really needs it. So it automatically starts the ignition sequence, so you're not having to wait. Okay? That's how it works. The fact that they've got a psychologist on board for the deeper investigation kind of indicates that one of the pilots decided, and you could take it as you, because these preliminary reports sort of said, this is it, you go read it. Somebody, the second in command, whoever was playing first officer in that takeoff, turned the fuel off at the time where there was no chance of recovery. And that's sobering. But they've got a psychologist on board, and I think you're going to find that it's happened before. German Wings did kind of the same thing. And that's sad. So that is what the report said. The preliminary report said somebody turned them off, and then whoever was in control of that aircraft desperately tried to turn them back on again. So they weren't found in the off position, and kudos to the pilot who tried, really tried to get it to work. We shall look forward to the full thing when we find out the why. So this makes that crash even worse. Any case, I'm done. Ways to support the channel down below. I shall look forward to catching you in the next one. Take it away, Arnie.
Thank you for watching Gabs' latest video. If you enjoyed it, you could like and share. If you want to see more, you can subscribe. Then hit the notification bell. If YouTube doesn't delete it, you can try and let him know what you think in the comments section below. He will be back. Now, get to the chopper.